Why the CIA assassinated JFK and who gave the orders. The company, cabal and conspiracy responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Who but the CIA could have positioned 8 snipers' nests around Dealey Plaza in Dallas. State of the nation. The profound grief and disappointment associated with the assassination of John F. Kennedy lingers in the consciousness of virtually every American who was alive on November 22, 1963. That day will forever be a day of infamy in the minds of every person whose hopes for a better world were exemplified by Jack and Jackie Kennedy's Camelot. The baby boomers and beatniks among us were especially impacted by the tragic events of that fateful Friday. When JFK was killed, everyone knew the dream of Camelot died with him. Most everyone sensed that the rest of the decade would not end well as the stage had been set with his bold and brazen assassination. However, no one imagined that his would then be followed by the state-sponsored murders of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. There was also the directly related assassination of Marilyn Monroe. John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963 by way of a classic, execution-style ritual sacrifice known as the killing of the king. This form of unusually public and gruesome murder of an extremely popular world leader is designed to shock and awe the mass consciousness. And so it did. As for the extremely brutal and public assassination of JFK, there are explicit reasons why such an execution plan was carried out in broad daylight, and especially during a highly watched presidential tour of Dallas. There is a secret society ritual that is the killing of the king. The national leader of the people is only a figurehead and has no real power. Power lies behind the scenes within dark secrets. Others pull the strings of the politician puppets. If an upstart politician puppet makes waves or rocks the boat or doesn't play ball, that puppet gets eliminated. It is why Caesar was killed. It is why Kennedy was killed. If you disturb the real power structure, you can be targeted for removal. Such assassinations demonstrate to the world who has the real power. It is a bloody statement of who is really in charge, and the truth is our secret rulers control from dark shadows. There is a reason the ace is higher than the king in a deck of cards. The ace represents the secret societies that truly run the show. The conspiracy. Screenshot October 31, 2015 at 3:52:05 p.m. It's entirely true that the massive conspiracy to assassinate JFK was unlike any other. The same can be said about the cover-up. The tremendous amount of time and energy, personnel and resources put into this extremely well-planned and highly coordinated coup d'état can only be explained by the dire threat that JFK represented to the power structure of the world. Truly, in Jack Kennedy the world's shadow government WSG saw the likes of which they had never seen before. Hence, his grisly public execution was carried out to send a message to every other world leader never to leave the reservation, particularly in the manner that JFK chose to. Not only did John Kennedy leave their reservation, he was intent on burning it down for all to see. In so doing, JFK essentially left them with no choice. Of course, he knew full well that he was literally a walking bullseye, which is why he even showed up in Dallas on that ominous Friday morning. He was plenty warned by psychics and astrologers, friends and family in advance. Nevertheless, he knew that there was no way out. He had already violated profoundly too many of the rules of the game, especially as the leader of the greatest superpower of the modern age, the United States of America. The photo montage above well captures the individuals who were directly responsible for the killing of Kennedy on one level, that is, John F. Kennedy, in his own very unique way, made an enemy of each of those power players. By virtue of acting according to his conscience, Kennedy was destined to turn these men into his arch-enemies. That is the way it was meant to be. Victor Laszlo, The JFK-like character in the movie Casablanca aptly describes the predicament that Jack Kennedy found himself in during the tumultuous early 1960s, which led to the inescapable fate that he suffered. Each of us has a destiny. For good, or for evil. Quite unfortunately for Jack Kennedy, as well as the nation, the highest levels of the U.S. government were populated with many more who were inclined toward the latter. These men would not be denied their wars, and especially not their war profiteering. Nor would they be thwarted in their attempt to create a new world order using the USA as the military arm of a one-world government. Given this setting, it is much easier to understand why the CIA was the primary coordinating agency behind the assassination setup, takedown and cover-up. Only they had the power, the black budget, and the worldwide network to implement such a complex execution plan, convoluted post-assassination game plan and complicated cover-up. The CIA also had the greatest interest in the success of the coup d'état, functioning as the chief enforcement agency for the entire military-industrial complex as they do. The backstory, the real backstory. Rather than discuss the roles of each of the integral accomplices in this assassination conspiracy, the purpose of this essay is to introduce certain key points of information and historical facts which have been completely left out of the history books. These many inconvenient truths, if you will, when considered in the aggregate, weave a web of deceit that has entrapped each perpetrator of the JFK assassination. They have also woven a revelatory tapestry of truth about Jack Kennedy et al. That is as awe-inspiring as it is magnificent. For example, among those who are knowledgeable about the true history of the Kennedy clan, it is well known that patriarch Joseph P. Kennedy made the family fortune through bootlegging. To succeed so well in that business, there was no avoiding working very closely with the mafia. After all, the major mob families of New York City, Chicago and New Orleans in particular, and their surrogates completely controlled that business nationwide, which was made possible by the official prohibition in the United States. Black markets have a way of quickly creating a very rich and powerful criminal class whose organized crime is then exploited by the political class for its revenues and influence. It was during this specific period, the Prohibition, that the stage was set for what was soon to follow in the USA and throughout the world. For the Prohibition period created the conducive environment for an insidious coup d'état to take place within the U.S. federal government. Only because their father was the powerful and rich liquor magnate that he was, were John, Robert and Ted Kennedy made grimly aware of the real powers and hidden forces that ran the show, especially the show of American government. Each of the brothers were given a unique window of observation into the greatest conspiracy of modern history, the outright subversion and takeover of the United States of America. Key point: there is a well-known intergenerational family dynamic whereby the sons only when they are highly evolved souls will work very hard to redeem the sins of the father. In the case of the three Kennedy brothers, did this primordial impulse find a full flowering. Especially in the person of John F. Kennedy was the resolve and dedication to use his exceedingly unique life experience and mundane knowledge for the benefit of his country undetribble. Having witnessed firsthand the seedy underbelly of American governance and commerce very close up from a young age, he knew what his mission in life was to be. When his older brother, Joe Jr., was killed during World War II, perhaps he knew his fate was sealed. It was Joseph Jr. who his father had painstakingly groomed to be the first Catholic President of the United States, not John. It was through this and other extraordinary twists of fate that compelled Jack Kennedy to embark on his own mission impossible. With this critical understanding, the reader is highly encouraged to watch the following video. This exceedingly well-researched presentation depicts the most authoritative assassination narrative to date. Not only does it provide the factual background of the day of JFK's public execution, November 22, 1963, it also breaks down the evolution of the whole conspiracy with exceptional detail. For instance, each of the 8 snipers' nests indicated in the preceding graphic, which surrounded Kennedy's motorcade as it passed by the infamous Dealey Plaza in Dallas, are fully explained with strikingly accurate details in the video. In view of this major disclosure as well as many others, everyone is highly encouraged to watch it and pass it on. There is no question that the producer and director of the video below was given special access to highly classified information and provided extremely sensitive data by an individual who was prominently configured in the original assassination conspiracy. Lee Harvey Oswald, the innocent patsy. After watching the video, it ought to be obvious that such an execution plan could only be implemented with the full cooperation of the Secret Service, CIA, FBI, Dallas Police Department, Dallas County Sheriff, Texas state government, as well as various key elements within the U.S. Armed Forces. The only person who didn't have anything to do with this cold-blooded murder was Lee Harvey Oswald. He was actually working undercover for Attorney General Bobby Kennedy and had warned JFK through the FBI of a previous assassination conspiracy that was hatched in Chicago earlier that month planned for November 2. The previous link offers a very important perspective that aligns with the true backstory and explains particularly how and why LHO was framed by the CIA because he infiltrated their assassination conspiracy. It also shows that evidence proves LHO worked for both the CIA and FBI. Here's a quite telling excerpt which bumps up directly against the bogus official narrative advanced by the thoroughly corrupt Warren Commission. In the end, Lee Harvey Oswald will be known as the unsung hero who was quite meticulously framed by the CIA, the FBI and the Dallas Police Department. Framed because he was known by the CIA to be working very closely with the Kennedy brothers. John Kennedy was well known for his dissatisfaction with the CIA's incorrigible abuse of power and numerous rogue elements. Both he and Robert were intent on eliminating all the black operations conducted by the CIA in collaboration with the Mafia and Cuban exiles who wanted Fidel Castro dead. Particularly after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, was JFK determined to rein in the CIA, if not shut it down altogether. 1. In light of this now indisputable information regarding Lee Harvey Oswald, it is much easier to comprehend why the Warren Commission was so determined to portray him as a lone gunman. The whole CIA coordinated cover-up was based on this obvious and ridiculous fiction and, therefore, it had to be defended at all costs. And so it was right up to this very day. Then there is this excerpt about the establishment of the Assassination Records Review Board. The Assassination Records Review Board (ARRB) was created in 1992 after the release of Oliver Stone's film JFK. This board has prompted the release of over 2 million pages of declassified documents related directly to the assassination. According to Jim DiEugenio, a longtime JFK assassination researcher, the ARRB produced a literal treasure trove of new information. One of the most surprising things that the ARRB disclosed was the volume of files on Oswald held by both the CIA and FBI, after both agencies had long denied that they had much paper on Oswald. But it was not just the volume of documents, it was the unexpected direction they pointed. 4. Jeremy Gunn, the ARRB's former counsel, spoke at Stanford University on May 18, 1998 about the investigation of the JFK assassination. He stated that, given what the ARRB discovered by way of hard evidence and credible testimony, he would much rather be defending Oswald than prosecuting him. 1. The co-conspirators, their MO and intention. The following cast of characters shows only a few of the major masterminds and high-level co-conspirators who closely collaborated to assassinate the President of the United States of America. They do, however, represent some of the most powerful people in America during the 1960s. Nonetheless, they really only represent the web of deceit that is only one level away from the actual scene of the crime. In fact, there are many levels of command and control for a false flag black operation of this complexity and difficulty. Going back further, through each deeper level of real power and authority, there are also layers of more control and deception which the true perpetrators felt was necessary to sufficiently insulate them from even an iota of incrimination. What's the point? As David Ferry utters with extreme amazement and apprehension and astonishment and anxiety in Oliver Stone's JFK. Shit, this is too effing big for you, you know that? Who did the president, who killed Kennedy, if man? It's a mystery. It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma. The effing shooters don't even know. Don't you get it? 2. This is precisely why those many rogue elements within government and law enforcement were able to maintain the assassination cover-up for well over 50 years. The true nature and magnitude of the cover-up was so implausible and immense, respectively, that it would be extremely difficult for anyone to believe that such a multifarious conspiracy could be effectively, or even practically, sustained. And that's just the way they wanted it. Even considering those few stalwart conspiracy theorists and professional investigative journalists like attorney Mark Lane, the company aka the Central Intelligence Agency had absolutely no fear of exposure. They reasoned correctly that if and when the truth ever did break through for those who possessed refined critical thinking skills, they could be relied upon to credibly state the case that the CIA really did do it, and with plenty of solid proof to back it up. The perps knew that eventually the growing body of evidence, scientific, anecdotal and circumstantial, would eventually become so compelling and irrefutable that only an idiot would ever believe the Warren Commission report. In this fashion the country would develop an inbred fear of the CIA, FBI, NSA, DIA as well as the eventual DHS. After all, any entity that could efficiently assassinate a popular president in broad daylight could get away with anything. Isn't this just what they wanted the American people to believe? And didn't this huge psyop give rise to exactly the type of herd mentality which now predominates throughout the USA? Marilyn Monroe and the Scarlet Pimpernel. Who has not been exposed to the barrage of false news reports that tell a story about the ever-growing number of alleged liaisons that JFK purportedly had with the beautiful women in his life? Why would the CIA and MSM, mainstream media controlled by the CIA, relentlessly introduce fictitious news stories about these non-existent affairs over the course of the past 52 years? How could the uncommonly noble and self-sacrificing Jack Kennedy possibly stray from his Catholic upbringing, and so recklessly jeopardize national security by setting himself up to being blackmailed, by engaging in such inappropriate and dangerous behavior? The best answer to these very good questions is as follows. JFK knew that he was the most closely monitored president in U.S. history up to that point in time. He was not unaware of the massive and sophisticated spying capabilities of the CIA, NSA, FBI, and DIA, which was inaugurated during his presidency. Clueless about the national security apparatus, JFK was not. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy, served as the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain and was well schooled in the ways of Anglo-American espionage, state-of-the-art surveillance and the use of honeypots. Therefore, JFK thoroughly understood that his every move was being watched 24/7. Being the most watched person in America, does anyone really think he would even attempt to stray from the reservation for the purpose of having whimsical sexual liaisons? 3. Now, then, why is the CIA and company so deliberate at propping up this completely false narrative, with fake sexual exploits and all? Because those putative sexual affairs were in actuality affairs of state. How so? The true story of Marilyn Monroe is perhaps the most instructive regarding the ways in which JFK routinely employed young women in order to escape the prison of the White House, so that he could carry on the affairs of state in secret. Only in this manner was he able to defuse the Cuban Missile Crisis through the same back channels with Russia, which were established by Marilyn Monroe prior to her murder by the CIA. She was also known by her code name Masha in intelligence circles. Now the reader knows why she, too, was assassinated on August 5, 1962, shortly after meeting with Bobby Kennedy on the day before her death in the afternoon of August 4. The Kennedy brothers relied quite heavily on Marilyn Monroe to serve as an essential intermediary with the Soviet Union's premier Nikita Khrushchev during the months prior to most tense phase of the Cuban Missile Crisis from October 16 to 28, 1962. In her role as Masha, Marilyn Monroe greatly assisted the Kennedy brothers in carrying on vital back-channel discussions directly with Khrushchev before the crisis even erupted. Were it not for these ultra-secret negotiations, the worst of the missile crisis would have had an entirely different ending. The agents of the World Shadow Government were well aware of how their plans were being deliberately circumvented, hence, they eliminated Marilyn Monroe before they triggered the full-blown crisis 2 months later. They also set about the process of exacting revenge on the remaining two of this remarkably patriotic trio. It should also be noted that Khrushchev, too, was ignominiously deposed as the Soviet premier in 1964 by the same ruling elites that oversaw the assassinations of the Kennedy brothers and Monroe for subverting their plans to exploit the crisis toward a much greater outcome for total world domination. To more fully understand just how enthusiastically JFK embraced his role as a modern-day Scarlet Pimpernel, the following article provides some penetrating insight and privileged information. The crucial point here is that JFK had very serious relations with multiple women in his official life as a means of carrying out his own hidden agenda, which had been made practically impossible within the corridors of the West Wing. Only under the cover of those supposed trysts was he able to receive and pass on vital information within his own spy network. Conclusion. Truly, the assassination of John F. Kennedy was so much bigger than anyone realized in that moment of history. In fact, it continues to loom as a hugely dark shadow over the American Republic. It was Jim Garrison, the district attorney of Orleans Parish, who conducted the only prosecution related to the assassination of JFK, who once said that the American people were obligated to determine the truth about the state-sponsored murder of JFK. He likewise asserted that justice must be served if the nation was to survive as a viable democracy and constitutional republic. He was fully aware that an audacious coup d'état had taken place on the streets of Dallas on November 22, 1963. Jim Garrison's interview with Johnny Carson in 1968 re the JFK assassination conspiracy very informative and quite telling, especially regarding Carson's loyalties. What Jim Garrison also knew was that the heart and soul of the country had been profoundly wounded. He was intuitively aware that if that wound was not properly healed, it would fester and develop into a raging infection, eventually killing the original spirit of the American founding fathers. Having passed away in 1992, Garrison never saw the CIA-coordinated false flag terror attacks of 9/11. Nonetheless, his grave warning to the U.S. citizenry of his day served as a prediction and promise that such an apocalyptic event would inevitably occur. JFK to 9/11 Everything is a Rich Man's Trick provides a definitive account of what happened then on November 22, what really transpired on September 11, what is taking place today, and what will occur tomorrow and in the future. Every U.S. citizen ought to be familiar with the factual content of this video, if for no other reason than to honor the last real American president who knowingly and willingly sacrificed his life in order to preserve a more perfect union. There are countless other good souls who have also given their lives for this country during the unfolding of this epochal and highly consequential American drama. Robert F. Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald and Marilyn Monroe are just three of those who ought to be honored for their selfless service. Likewise, the events of 9/11 have produced hundreds of individuals and groups who have been killed or injured, prosecuted and persecuted, imprisoned and bankrupted because of their pursuit of the truth and revelation of the facts. May the courageous spirit of John F. Kennedy descend upon us all. May each of us be infused with his indomitable resolve and fearlessness. And may we honor JFK's unparalleled self-sacrifice by taking back this nation from those who have stolen it. If not us, then who? If not here, then where? If not now, then when? 4. State of the Nation, November 20, 2015.